The distant sound of exotic birds echoed through the dense canopy as Kalen checked his makeshift trap for the third time that morning. 5 years stranded in this remote jungle had taught him patience, precision, and above all, survival. The former biologist had transformed from a curious academic into a weathered explorer who could read the forest signs as easily as he once read scientific journals. Kalen's small shelter, nestled between the gnarled roots of an ancient tree, had become more home than the temporary refuge he'd initially intended. Maps and sketches of local flora and fauna decorated the walls, meticulously cataloged with notes in his increasingly cramped handwriting. Each discovery fed his scientific curiosity while simultaneously deepening his knowledge of this dangerous paradise. The jungle belonged to the Xylos, though. That much had been clear from his first encounter with their hunting party 3 years ago. The tribe maintained a cautious distance, occasionally leaving warnings when he ventured too close to their sacred territories. He respected their boundaries, learning their ways from afar through careful observation. Their harmony with the environment intrigued him, the way they seemed to communicate with plants, their ceremonies that coincided with natural phenomena, their reverence for the forest's rhythms. Today, however, Kalen was breaking his own rules. The Crystal Grotto lay deep in forbidden territory, but rumors of its bioluminescent properties had proven too tempting for his scientific mind. He needed samples, just a few, to complete his study of the region's unique ecology. "Just in and out," he whispered to himself, adjusting his pack as he navigated the treacherous descent into the cavern. "No one will even know I was here." The grotto opened before him like an ethereal cathedral. Crystals of varying sizes and colors jutted from walls that pulsed with an inner light, casting prismatic shadows across the damp stone floor. Pools of clear water reflected the glow, creating the illusion of stars above and below. Kalen stood transfixed, momentarily forgetting his purpose as he absorbed the magical sight. A faint sound, something between a whimper and a chirp, broke his trance. Following the noise, he discovered a small alcove partially hidden behind a crystalline formation. There, nestled in what appeared to be fragments of a translucent shell, lay a tiny creature unlike anything he had ever seen. No larger than his palm, the being possessed iridescent scales that shifted colors with each labored breath. 6 delicate limbs ended in barely formed claws, and twin protrusions on its back suggested the eventual development of wings or fins. Its eyes, disproportionately large for its fragile body, fixed on Kalen with an intelligence that sent a shiver down his spine. "What are you?" he whispered, carefully scanning the grotto for any sign of a parent or nest. Finding none, he noted the creature's weakened state and the cool temperature of the cavern. Too cool, perhaps, for a reptilian species requiring external heat. Against his better judgment, Kalen removed his outer shirt and gently wrapped the creature, shell fragments and all. "I can't just leave you here to die," he murmured as the tiny being nuzzled weakly against his warmth. "I'll bring you back once you're stronger, I promise." He named it Nyx, after the shadow play its scales created in the light of his campfire that first night. Initially, feeding the creature proved challenging until Kalen discovered its appetite for certain bioluminescent fungi that grew near his shelter. Within days, Nyx had doubled in size and showed remarkable attachment to its rescuer, following Kalen around his camp and curling against his neck during cool nights. Weeks passed, and Nyx's growth accelerated beyond anything Kalen could have anticipated. The once palm-sized being now reached his knee, its features becoming more defined and distinctly predatory. The wing-like appendages had developed into membranous gliders that allowed it to leap between trees with uncanny precision. Most startling was its ability to blend almost perfectly with its surroundings, its scales shifting color and pattern to match any environment. Kalen devoted his journal to documenting Nyx's rapid development, creating detailed sketches and behavioral notes. The creature displayed problem-solving abilities that challenged Kalen's understanding of animal intelligence. It learned to respond to verbal commands, brought Kalen items he requested, and even seem to understand complex concepts when explained patiently. "You're going to change everything we know about evolutionary biology," Kalen told Nix one evening, scratching under its jaw ridge where it particularly enjoyed attention. "When I finally make it back to civilization, my colleagues won't believe you exist without seeing you." The creature tilted its head, eyes swirling with colors that Kalen had begun to associate with different moods. This particular azure-gold combination signaling contentment and curiosity. Their peaceful existence shattered 3 months after Nix's discovery. While gathering specimens near a river that marked the boundary of Xylo's territory, Kalen and Nix encountered a jungle cat, a sleek, deadly predator that typically avoided humans, but now, driven by hunger or territorial instinct, had chosen to attack. Kalen raised his makeshift spear defensively as the cat circled, but he knew his chances against such a swift hunter were minimal. The cat lunged without warning, its trajectory bringing it directly toward Kalen's exposed throat. What happened next occurred too quickly for Kalen to fully process. Nix, now the size of a large dog, intercepted the cat mid-leap with a bone-chilling shriek that seemed to distort the very air. The creature's normally sleek body expanded, revealing rows of previously hidden spines that glowed with an eerie light. The cat's momentum carried it directly onto these spines, which punctured deeply before Nix twisted with impossible speed, pinning the larger predator to the ground. The jungle cat's struggles ceased within seconds, its body going limp as Nix's scales pulsed with a deep crimson hue. When the creature turned back to Kalen, its eyes shone with an intensity that momentarily froze his blood. Predator's eyes, ancient and unforgiving, before softening into the familiar gaze of his companion. "By all that's holy," Kalen whispered, reaching a trembling hand toward Nix, who nuzzled against it as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. "What are you really?" The incident left unmistakable evidence. The jungle cat's body displayed wounds that no known predator in the region could inflict. The distinctive pattern of punctures and the residual bioluminescent fluid would undoubtedly draw attention. Kalen disposed of the carcass as best he could, but anxiety gnawed at him. He had crossed into Xylo's territory. He had brought something potentially dangerous into their world. His fears proved justified a week later when he awoke to find his shelter surrounded. A dozen warriors of the Xylo's tribe stood in perfect formation, their bodies adorned with natural pigments that enhanced rather than disguised their presence. Their weapons, spears tipped with crystal shards and bows strung with fibers Kalen had never successfully identified, were raised not in immediate threat, but in unmistakable warning. Their leader stepped forward, a tall man whose elaborate headdress and scarified chest marked him as a warrior of high rank. "I am Theron," he announced in the common trade language, his accent thick but words precise. "You harbor the forest shadow. It belongs to the sacred prophecies, not to outsiders. Surrender it, and you may leave our land alive." Before Kalen could respond, Nix emerged from the shelter, now standing nearly waist-high. The creature's scales darkened to a threatening obsidian as it positioned itself between Kalen and the warriors, a low humming emanating from its throat. The Xylo's warriors stepped back as one, several making protective symbols with their free hands. Theron's eyes widened, though he maintained his commanding stance. "The forest shadow has grown strong," he said, his voice betraying a mixture of awe and fear. "Too strong to remain in the hands of one who does not understand its power or purpose." "Understand more than you think," Kalen responded, placing a calming hand on Nix's flank. "Nix is under my protection, as I am under his. We mean no harm to your people." Theron's expression hardened. The sacred texts speak of the shadow's return. It heralds the time of great testing. It cannot remain with an outsider. The tense standoff might have escalated had another voice not interrupted. A clear, commanding female voice that caused the warriors to part immediately, creating a path through their formation. "Perhaps the outsider is part of the prophecy, Theron. Have you considered this?" She appeared younger than Theron, though her bearing suggested equal or greater authority. Her attire combined traditional Xylo's elements with unique modifications, crystals similar to those from the grotto, where Kaelin had found Nyx adorned her ceremonial garments, and a circlet of woven vines and small glowing flowers crowned her head. Most striking were her eyes, amber flecked with green, observant and penetrating. Princess Lyra, Theron acknowledged with reluctant deference. This matter concerns the safety of our entire tribe. The Council of Elders should decide the outsider's fate. Lyra approached slowly, her gaze shifting between Kaelin and Nyx with unconcealed fascination. To Kaelin's surprise, Nyx's threatening posture relaxed slightly, its scales shifting to a curious pattern of deep blue and violet. The forest shadow responds to her. One warrior whispered, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. It responds to blood. Of the forest. Another added with reverence. Lyra raised a hand for silence, then addressed Kaelin directly. You have formed a bond with a creature of our oldest legends. This cannot be ignored or dismissed. She gestured toward the path through the jungle. You will come to the village. Both of you. The elders must see what has awakened in our time. Kaelin recognized it wasn't a request. With limited options and genuine curiosity about what the Xylos knew of Nyx's origins, he nodded agreement. We'll come peacefully, but Nyx stays with me. The shadow remains bound to you for now, Lyra conceded, ignoring Theron's disapproving glare. But understand, outsider, if it threatens our people, not even your bond will save either of you. The Xylos village revealed itself as an organic marvel. Structures grown rather than built, living trees and vines guided over generations to form dwellings that merged seamlessly with the forest canopy. Platforms connected by suspension bridges spiraled upward into the treetops, while ceremonial spaces occupied clearings below. Everywhere, bioluminescent plants, similar to those Nyx favored, provided natural lighting, creating an ethereal atmosphere as dusk approached. The villagers emerged from their dwellings to witness the procession, their reactions ranging from fearful retreats to awed murmurs as they caught sight of Nyx. Children were quickly ushered inside, though many peered curiously through woven screens. Kaelin and Nyx were escorted to a circular structure at the village center, a council chamber whose living walls were embedded with crystals similar to those in the grotto. Inside, a semicircle of elders awaited, their faces weathered by time, but eyes sharp with wisdom and wariness. The outsider who tamed the forest shadow announced the central figure, an elderly woman whose elaborate markings and crystal-embedded staff marked her as the tribe's spiritual leader. You have disturbed ancient balances, stranger. I found an abandoned creature and cared for it, Kaelin replied, careful to keep his tone respectful but firm. I know nothing of shadows or prophecies. Ignorance does not absolve consequence, the elder responded. The forest shadow is not a pet to be tamed or a curiosity to be studied. It is a harbinger. Theron stepped forward. The traditions are clear, Elder Sirona. The shadow must be contained before it fully awakens. The outsider has already allowed it to grow beyond the size recorded in any text. And would you suggest we kill what might be our salvation? Lyra interjected, taking a position beside Kaelin rather than with the other tribal leaders. The complete prophecy speaks not only of testing, but of protection. Elder Sirona raised her staff, silencing further debate. Bring the Keeper of Tales. All must be known before judgment is passed. While they waited, Kaelin observed the chamber more closely. Intricate carvings covered every surface, depicting what appeared to be the tribe's history. One section particularly caught his attention, figures battling a looming darkness that consumed the forest. At the center of that darkness was a form disturbingly similar to what Nyx might become if its growth continued at its current rate. The Keeper of Tales arrived, a blind man whose eyes had been replaced with small, glowing crystals that pulsed with inner light. Without preamble, he began to recite in a melodic voice that seemed to resonate with the crystals throughout the chamber. When balance falters and shadows grow, the forest shadow shall return. First small and weak, then mighty and terrible. Its coming heralds the great testing, when darkness rises from within the land. Destruction follows in its wake. unless the shadow is bound by foreign heart and guided by the forest blood. Together 3 shall stand against the void, or together all shall fall to darkness. A heavy silence followed his words. Kalen felt Nick's press against his leg, sensing his tension. The foreign heart, Lyra said finally, gesturing to Kalen, and the forest shadow, bound to him already. I am of the royal bloodline, the forest blood. The prophecy speaks of the 3 of us. Theron shook his head vehemently. This is a convenient interpretation, princess. The outsider knows nothing of our ways. The shadow grows more dangerous each day. The most prudent course is to end this threat before it fully manifests. Elder Serona studied Nyx intently. The creature shows unusual restraint for one of its kind. The bond appears genuine. She turned to Kalen. Tell us, outsider, what do you know of your Nyx and its capabilities? Kalen described finding the creature, its rapid growth, its intelligence, and the incident with the jungle cat, carefully emphasizing Nyx's protective rather than aggressive nature. Throughout his explanation, Nyx remained calm, occasionally making soft, trilling sounds that seemed to intrigue the elders. It grows too quickly, one elder commented. The texts speak of a gradual awakening over years, not months. Perhaps because it was removed from its sacred resting place, suggested another. The natural constraints were broken. The debate continued into the night, with Kalen and Nyx placed under guard in a small but comfortable dwelling. Despite the hospitality, the guards outside made their status clear. They were prisoners until the council decided their fate. Late that night, a soft rustling at the entrance preceded Lyra's appearance. She slipped inside with the silence of one accustomed to moving undetected. I came to see the bond between you, she explained before Kalen could question her presence. To understand what the elders cannot. To his surprise, Nyx approached Lyra without hesitation, allowing her to run a hand over its scales, which rippled with gentle pulses of blue-green light. It trusts you, Kalen observed. As it should. We are connected by more than prophecy. Lyra revealed a small crystal pendant around her neck, similar in composition to the fragments found with Nyx. My bloodline has guarded the secret of the forest shadow for generations. We are its designated guardians, though few believe the legend would manifest in our lifetime. What exactly is Nyx? Kalen asked the question that had haunted him since the creature's unexpected growth and abilities had become apparent. A balance keeper, Lyra replied, her fingers tracing patterns on Nyx's scales that the creature seemed to enjoy. Created in ancient times when the forest's essence was first threatened. It sleeps until needed, growing in response to danger. Her expression grew troubled. Its awakening now suggests a threat greater than any in our recorded history. Theron wants to kill it. Theron fears what he cannot control, but he is not wrong to be cautious. She fixed Kalen with an intense gaze. The forest shadow can indeed become a terrible destroyer if its development is not properly guided. That is why the binding ritual exists, to ensure it remains an ally rather than becomes our extinction. And this ritual requires you and me. The foreign heart who forms the initial bond, and the forest's blood who completes it. She nodded. Without both elements, the shadow might grow beyond all constraint, driven only by instinct to protect the forest by any means necessary. Even the destruction of all perceived threats, including the Xylos themselves. Before Kalen could question further, a commotion outside drew their attention. A warrior burst into the dwelling without ceremony, his expression grave. Princess, you're needed immediately. The border sentries report strange occurrences. The trees along the eastern perimeter are dying, animals fleeing in large numbers. Elder Serona believes it may be the beginning of the great testing. Lyra's expression hardened with resolve. It seems our time for deliberation has run out. She turned to Kalen. Prepare yourself and your companion. Events are unfolding more quickly than anticipated. The following morning revealed the extent of the crisis. A delegation of Xylos scouts reported that a mysterious blight had begun spreading through the eastern forest. Plants withering to dust within hours, water sources turning foul, wildlife either fleeing or becoming unnaturally aggressive. Most disturbing were reports of shadow-like entities moving through affected areas, absorbing life essence from anything they encountered. The devouring, Elder Sirona named it, her voice heavy with dread. The ancient texts speak of a force that consumes the balance itself. It appears during times of great imbalance, feeding on the discord between natural elements. What caused this imbalance? Kalen asked, trying to understand the phenomenon from a scientific perspective. Perhaps your presence, Theron suggested coldly. Or perhaps the removal of the forest shadow from its resting place before its natural awakening time. Assigning blame serves no purpose now, Lyra interrupted. The devouring has begun, and according to the prophecy, only the forest shadow guided properly can counter it. Elder Sirona nodded gravely. The binding ritual must be performed immediately before the devouring reaches our sacred grounds. Princess Lyra, as the strongest carrier of the forest's blood in generations, you must serve as the conduit. What exactly does this ritual entail? Kalen asked, concerned for both Lyra's safety and Nyx's well-being. The creation of a triangular bond, Elder Sirona explained. Currently, your connection with the shadow is strong but incomplete, based on nurturing and mutual protection. The ritual will forge a deeper connection that includes the forest's interests as embodied by the royal bloodline. The shadow will maintain its loyalty to you while gaining purpose and restraint through Princess Lyra. And the risks? A heavy silence followed before Lyra answered. If the ritual fails, the shadow could reject both bonds entirely. In such cases, the text suggests it would become fully autonomous and potentially hostile to all parties, including Lyra. Elder Sirona added solemnly. The backlash of a rejected bond can be fatal to the blood carrier. Theron stepped forward, his stance aggressive. This is madness. We risk our princess on a ritual not performed in countless generations, with an outsider and a creature grown too powerful too quickly. There are alternatives. Your alternatives involve destroying what may be our only defense against the devouring, Lyra challenged. Would you have us flee our ancestral home? Hide while the forest dies around us? I would have you live to lead us elsewhere if necessary, Theron countered. Your duty is to your people first. My duty is to the forest that sustains my people, Lyra replied firmly. Without it, we have no future regardless of where we flee. She turned to Kalen. The choice must be mutual. The forest shadow is bound to you. Will you participate in the ritual? Kalen looked at Nyx, now nearly reaching his chest in height, its intelligent eyes fixed on him with complete trust. The creature had grown far beyond what Kalen had anticipated when he rescued it, becoming something he still didn't fully understand. Yet their bond remained unbroken. If it means protecting Nyx and helping your people, yes, he decided. But I need to understand the ritual completely before we proceed. As preparations began, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Scouts reported the devouring advancing faster than anticipated, already consuming nearly a quarter of the Xylos territory. Animals infected by the blight attacked several outlying settlements, forcing evacuations toward the central village. The ritual would take place at the Heart Spring, a natural wellspring at the center of the oldest part of the forest, where massive trees formed a protective circle around a pool of crystal-clear water. According to Elder Sirona, the spring represented the purest concentration of the forest's life force and would amplify the ritual's power. As dusk approached, Kalen, Lyra, and Nyx were escorted to the sacred site. The pool glowed with bioluminescent organisms, casting ethereal light across the gathered tribal elders and selected witnesses. Among them stood Theron, his expression dark with disapproval, but his presence a reluctant acknowledgement of the ritual's importance. Kalen and Lyra were positioned on opposite sides of the pool, with Nyx at the third point of their triangle. Elder Sirona began chanting in the ancient Xylos language, her staff striking the ground in rhythm as attendants placed crystalline markers around the ritual space. When the waters began to spiral, Lyra instructed Kalen quietly, "You must focus entirely on your connection with Nyx every memory, every feeling of protection and trust. I will attempt to join that connection, creating a bridge between all three of us." Kalen nodded, his scientific skepticism warring with the undeniable evidence of forces beyond his understanding that he'd witnessed since arriving in this forest. Whatever was happening defied conventional explanation, but the threat was real, and Nyx's extraordinary nature suggested the ritual might indeed hold some solution. The chanting intensified as Elder Serona sprinkled sacred powders into the pool, causing the bioluminescence to flare brilliantly. The water began to move, swirling into a gentle vortex that emitted pulses of light in perfect harmony with the Elder's chanting. Following Lyra's instructions, Kalen focused on Nyx, recalling their first encounter in the Crystal Grotto, the night spent nurturing the tiny creature, the gradual development of trust and communication between them. He remembered the jungle cat incident, not with fear, but with understanding of Nyx's protective instinct and the bond that had made him worth protecting in the creature's alien perspective. Across the pool, Lyra had entered a trance-like state, her body swaying slightly as she extended her hands toward both Kalen and Nyx. The crystal pendant at her throat glowed with increasing intensity, matching the pulses from the swirling pool. Nyx remained unusually still, its scales cycling through colors rapidly as the ritual energies built around them. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with potential that raised the hair on Kalen's arms and created visible distortions in the space between the three participants. The moment of connection came with breathtaking suddenness. Kalen felt something like an electrical current pass through his mind, carrying with it impressions and emotions not his own. He glimpsed fragments of Lyra's consciousness, her sense of duty to her people, her deep connection to the forest that went beyond mere stewardship into something almost symbiotic, her fears and hopes intertwined with the fate of the Xylos. More alien, but equally powerful, were the impressions from Nyx, a consciousness far more complex than Kalen had imagined, with perception extending beyond normal senses into awareness of energy flows and elemental balances. He felt Nyx's instinctive understanding of its purpose, dormant until now, but awakening fully through the ritual, guardian, balancer, weapon against corruption. The triangular connection strengthened, becoming a continuous flow of awareness between all three participants. Through this link, Kalen suddenly understood what neither words nor observation had fully conveyed: the true nature of the forest as a single, vast organism of which the Xylos were as much a part as the trees themselves. The devouring wasn't merely destroying plants and animals. It was unraveling the living tapestry that bound all elements of the ecosystem together. The ritual reached its zenith as the swirling waters rose into a luminous column connecting earth and sky. Nyx responded with a transformation more complete than any Kalen had witnessed. The creature's body elongated and expanded, its scales hardening into armor-like plates while retaining their color-shifting abilities. Wing membranes unfurled to their full impressive span, and dormant features activated, creating a crown-like crest of sensory appendages around its now distinctly reptilian head. Through their connection, Kalen felt no fear from this metamorphosis, only the fulfillment of potential long dormant. Nyx had become what it was always meant to be: the forest shadow in its complete form, a predator of corrupting forces. The moment of triumph shattered with shocking violence as arrows whistled through the air. Theron and a group of loyal warriors launched their attack, determined to end what they perceived as a growing threat before the ritual could complete. "The outsider enslaves our princess," Theron shouted, knocking another arrow. "The shadow grows too powerful." "End this now." The arrow flew straight toward Lyra, whose trance state left her completely vulnerable. Kalen shouted a warning, but physical intervention was impossible across the pool's distance. Nyx reacted with blinding speed, its newly transformed body interposing between Lyra and the projectile. The arrow shattered against its hardened scales, the impact barely registering as the creature turned toward the attackers with unmistakable menace. The triangular connection wavered as combat interrupted the ritual's final phase. Kaelin felt Nyx's protective instincts surging toward uncontrolled aggression. Without the completed ritual to temper its reactions, the creature's response would be devastatingly disproportionate. "Nyx, no," Kaelin commanded, pouring every ounce of their established bond into the mental connection. "Protect, but don't kill." Simultaneously, Lyra fought through her ritual trance to add her influence. "Forest Shadow, hear me. They are misguided, but part of what we protect." Caught between its awakened purpose to eliminate threats and the restraining influence of its two bonded companions, Nyx froze in momentary conflict. This hesitation allowed Theron to advance, with a crystalline spear clearly designed to pierce even the creature's formidable defenses. The ritual's energy, disrupted from its intended course, erupted in a blinding flash that knocked all participants to the ground. When Kaelin's vision cleared, he found the ritual space transformed. A dome of shimmering energy had formed around the pool, with Kaelin, Lyra, and Nyx inside its protective barrier. Outside, Theron and his warriors found themselves unable to penetrate the barrier despite their efforts. Elder Sirona, who had been thrown clear of the immediate conflict, struggled to her feet with the aid of her staff. "The ritual has created its own completion," she announced with awe. "The Trinity Bond has formed a sanctuary." Within the dome, Kaelin felt the connection with both Lyra and Nyx stabilizing into something permanent yet flexible, a three-way understanding that preserved each individual's autonomy while creating a shared purpose. Nyx's aggression subsided into controlled vigilance, its form still imposing but no longer poised for immediate violence. "The bond is complete," Lyra confirmed, her voice stronger as she recovered from the ritual's demands. "I can feel the forest through both of you, its needs, its balance points." She turned toward the barrier, where Theron watched with frustrated rage. "And I know what must be done." To everyone's surprise, she commanded the barrier to part, creating an opening through which she addressed her people. "The Forest Shadow has accepted the ancient bond. It recognizes us as part of what it protects, not as threats to be eliminated." She gestured toward the eastern horizon, where an unnatural darkness had begun to obscure the stars. "The true enemy approaches. We must prepare." Theron stepped forward, weapons still raised. "Princess, you cannot trust." "Enough," Lyra's voice carried. New authority, amplified by the lingering energies of the ritual. "You have chosen fear over faith in our oldest traditions. While your concern for my safety honors your duty, your actions have nearly cost us our only defense against the devouring." Elder Sirona intervened, her weathered hand gripping Theron's arm with surprising strength. "The ritual has succeeded, warrior. Look beyond your prejudice and see what stands before you. The Trinity spoken of in our most sacred texts. The forest shadow, the foreign heart, and the forest's blood, united as foretold." Reluctantly, Theron lowered his weapon, though his expression remained suspicious. "What would you have us do, then?" "Prepare to defend the village," Lyra instructed. "The devouring advances faster than expected. We have until dawn before it reaches our boundaries." Throughout the night, the Xylos mobilized with impressive efficiency. Under Elder Sirona's guidance, protective symbols were etched into the living wood of the village structures, imbued with the same crystalline substance that had facilitated the ritual. Warriors prepared specialized weapons, spears and arrows coated with mixtures that Kaelin recognized as containing bioluminescent compounds similar to those Nyx had consumed during its growth. Through their newfound connection, Kaelin accessed Lyra's knowledge of these preparations. "The light essence counters the devouring's shadow nature," he realized aloud. "That's why Nyx was created. Its body naturally produces and concentrates this essence." "Yes," Lyra confirmed as she traced protective symbols on Kaelin's skin with luminous paint. The forest shadow was the forest's first defense, created from its purest essence. But alone, it would eventually succumb to the corruption it fights, become a destroyer rather than a protector. That's why the Trinity Bond was designed, to anchor it to conscious guides who could direct its power with wisdom rather than mere instinct. Nyx, now fully transformed into its magnificent and terrifying final form, patrolled the village perimeter with restless energy. Through their bond, Kalen sensed its eagerness to confront the approaching corruption, a purpose finally understood and embraced. Dawn arrived with unnatural swiftness as darkness consumed the eastern sky. The devouring manifested as a rolling wall of shadow that consumed light itself, punctuated by writhing tendrils that reached ahead to corrupt whatever they touched. Vegetation withered instantaneously in its path, and smaller creatures caught in its advance collapsed into desiccated husks. "It's time," Lyra announced, taking position at the village's eastern boundary. Kalen joined her, with Nyx completing their triangle formation. The assembled Xylos warriors formed a defensive line behind them, led by a grim-faced Theron who had apparently accepted, if not embraced, the situation's necessity. As the corruption approached, Kalen felt the Trinity bond intensify. Energy flowed between the three of them in continuous circuit, building in power with each circulation. Nyx's body began to illuminate from within, its scales radiating light that pushed back the encroaching shadows. The first tendrils of corruption reached the village boundary, blackening the ground and causing protective symbols to flare in resistance. Through their connection, Kalen and Lyra directed Nyx's rapidly building energy, focusing it not as a weapon, but as a cleansing force. With a sound that resembled both a roar and a song, Nyx released a massive pulse of purifying light that collided with the corruption's leading edge. Where the energies met, the darkness recoiled, evaporating into harmless particles that dispersed on the wind. But the victory proved momentary. The main body of the devouring surged forward with renewed intensity, as if angered by the resistance. Shadow tendrils lashed out specifically toward the Trinity, targeting the source of opposition. Kalen and Lyra maintained their focus, channeling energy to and through Nyx in rhythmic pulses that synchronized with the forest's natural energy flows. The Xylos warriors engaged corrupted creatures that broke through the initial line of defense, their crystal-tipped weapons proving effective, but not without cost, as several warriors fell to poisonous claws and fangs. The battle continued through the morning, with the Trinity gradually pushing back the corruption in their immediate vicinity, but unable to prevent its spread to either side of their position. The devouring was encircling the village, testing defenses from multiple directions. "We cannot maintain this indefinitely," Lyra acknowledged, fatigue evident in her voice despite the energy flowing through their bond. "We must strike at its source." "What is its source?" Kalen asked, firing his borrowed bow at a corrupted jungle cat that had broken through the defensive line. Through their connection, Lyra shared her understanding. The devouring originated from a fundamental imbalance, likely centered at a nexus point where the forest's natural energy flows converged. "The Crystal Grotto," she realized aloud. "Where you found Nyx. It's a major confluence of life energy. If corrupted, it would explain the devouring's power and rapid spread." Nyx confirmed this with a surge of recognition through their bond, accompanied by images of the grotto, transformed into a wellspring of darkness rather than light. "We need to reach the grotto," Kalen decided. "Cleanse it at the source." Theron, overhearing this exchange, approached with unexpected support. "I will lead a force to create a path. The princess must reach the grotto if there's any hope of ending this." The plan formed quickly. Theron and his warriors would cut a corridor through the corruption, allowing the Trinity to reach the grotto with enough energy reserved for the cleansing ritual. Elder Serona provided crystalline foci to amplify their combined power once they reached the source. The advance began immediately, with Theron's warriors forming a wedge formation around the Trinity. Nyx took the lead position, its massive form creating a natural battering ram against the corruption. Each pulse of purifying energy from the creature created momentary clearings through which the party advanced, while the warriors handled any corrupted creatures that attacked from the flanks. The journey proved more challenging than anticipated. The devouring seemed almost conscious in its response, concentrating its forces against their advance, as if recognizing the threat they posed. Twice they nearly lost warriors to sudden surges of shadow tendrils, saved only by Nyx's swift intervention. "It knows what we intend," Lyra observed. Her breath labored as she maintained the energy flow through their bond. The continuous channeling had taken its toll on both her and Kalen, whose scientific training had never prepared him for the metaphysical exertion required by the Trinity connection. "We're getting close," Kalen encouraged, recognizing landmarks despite their corruption. The familiar path to the Crystal Grotto had become an alien landscape. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, glowing fungi transformed into pulsating sacs of darkness, the very ground beneath their feet spongy with decay. As they approached the grotto entrance, the corruption's resistance intensified dramatically. A wall of pure shadow blocked their path, punctuated by glowing red eyes that opened and closed in disturbing patterns. The heart of the corruption, Elder Sirona confirmed from the rear of their formation. "It has fully infected the grotto's energy nexus." Nyx growled, the sound reverberating through the corrupted landscape as the creature gathered its energy for a final assault. Through their bond, Kalen felt its determination mingled with something like righteous anger. The corruption had taken over its birthplace, the sacred repository of the forest's purest essence. "Warriors, form the protection circle," Theron commanded, arranging his remaining forces in a defensive ring around the Trinity. "Give them the time they need." Kalen, Lyra, and Nyx formed their triangle once more, this time with the crystalline foci Elder Sirona had provided positioned at their center. As they synchronized their breathing and focused their intent, the crystals began to resonate, creating harmonic tones that seemed to disturb the shadow barrier. "Remember," Lyra instructed, her voice steady despite her exhaustion, "we are not fighting the corruption. We are restoring balance. The devouring is not an invader, but a symptom of imbalance within the forest itself." Through their connection, Kalen understood. The purifying energy they channeled was not destructive but transformative, designed to reintegrate the corrupted essence rather than destroy it. This approach required perfect harmony between all three members of the Trinity, each contributing a crucial element. Kalen's analytical understanding, Lyra's spiritual connection to the forest, and Nyx's raw power and instinctive knowledge of the forest's true nature. The ritual began with a soft chant from Lyra, words in the ancient Xylos language that spoke of renewal and return. Kalen focused on the scientific principles of energy conservation and transformation, visualizing the corruption as energy that could be redirected rather than eliminated. Nyx contributed the living memory of the forest's uncorrupted state, accessed through genetic memory that had remained dormant until the Trinity bond awakened it. The crystalline foci absorbed their combined intent, amplifying and focusing it into a beam of purifying light that struck the shadow barrier with increasing intensity. Where light met shadow, neither was immediately victorious. Instead, a curious integration began, with darkness and light swirling together in patterns that resembled the natural cycles of day and night, growth and decay, life and rest. "It's working," Elder Sirona observed with reverent awe. "The balance returns." But success came at tremendous cost. Maintaining the purification beam required ever-increasing energy from the Trinity. Kalen felt his consciousness stretching to its limits, while Lyra swayed on her feet, kept upright only by sheer determination. Even Nyx, with its formidable reserves, showed signs of depletion as the corruption fought to maintain its foothold. The shadow barrier thinned gradually, revealing glimpses of the crystal grotto beyond, now a twisted reflection of its former beauty, with crystals pulsing with corrupted energy and pools of once clear water turned to viscous shadow. At the center floated what appeared to be a negative image of Nyx itself, a shadow creature of similar form but opposite essence, apparently born from the same nexus, but representing imbalance rather than harmony. "The anti-shadow," Lyra gasped, recognition flowing through their bond. The text spoke of this possibility. When the balance tips too far, the Nexus creates not only a guardian, but also a destroyer. They are meant to annihilate each other, returning all to primordial void. Kalen felt Nyx's reaction. Not fear, but recognition of its counterpart and the terrible purpose encoded in their dual creation. If they fought as intended, both would be destroyed, along with much of the surrounding forest and the resulting release of energy. There has to be another way, Kalen insisted, searching through their combined knowledge for alternatives. The Trinity bond wasn't just for guiding Nyx. It was created to prevent exactly this outcome. Understanding dawned through their connection. The original creators of the system had foreseen this possibility and designed the Trinity bond as a failsafe, a way to reintegrate rather than destroy, to heal rather than purge. We need to expand our bond, Lyra realized, her voice barely audible above the energy storm surrounding them. Include the anti-shadow in the connection. The concept seemed impossible, extending their already strained bond to encompass a creature of pure corruption. Yet as the thought formed, Kalen felt Nyx's affirmation rippling through their connection. The forest shadow understood its counterpart in ways they could not, recognized it not as an enemy, but as a severed part of the same whole. With Theron and his warriors barely holding back waves of corrupted creatures attracted to the energy discharge, the Trinity adjusted their approach. Instead of directing purifying energy against the corruption, they opened their bond, creating a fourth point in their formation, an invitation rather than an attack. The anti-shadow responded with initial hostility, lashing out with tendrils of pure darkness that caused pain wherever they touched. But Nyx stood firm, absorbing the attacks while maintaining the open connection, offering acceptance rather than resistance. Gradually, the anti-shadow's assaults weakened as the Trinity's unwavering offer penetrated its reactive defenses. The creature paused, hovering at the threshold of their extended bond, caught between its programmed purpose and the unexpected alternative being presented. Kalen felt the moment of decision approach. The anti-shadow could not maintain its separate existence indefinitely in the presence of such a powerful invitation to reintegrate. Either it would accept and transform, or it would launch a final, potentially catastrophic attack out of self-preservation. In that critical moment, Lyra stepped forward despite Kalen's warning through their bond. She approached the anti-shadow directly, her hand extended in a gesture that transcended language or species barriers. "Return to balance," she spoke, her voice somehow carrying the combined authority of the Trinity. "You are not separate. You are not enemy. You are part of the whole." The anti-shadow pulsed once, twice, then extended a tendril that connected with Lyra's outstretched hand. The contact completed the circuit, creating not destruction but transformation. The corruption began flowing through the connection, not as an invasion, but as energy returning to its proper function. Nyx's body became the processing vessel, its natural ability to transform and purify energies working at unprecedented capacity. The creature grew luminous as it absorbed and converted the returning darkness, its form briefly destabilizing before reconfiguring into something new, slightly altered but fundamentally intact, now bearing subtle patterns of shadow that complemented rather than contradicted its luminous scales. The crystal grotto transformation followed swiftly, corruption receding as balance restored throughout the nexus point. Crystals regained their natural colors and resonance. Water cleared to pristine purity, and the natural energy flows of the location re-established themselves with almost audible relief. The cleansing effect radiated outward from the grotto in an expanding wave that swept through the forest. Corrupted plants and creatures encountered by this wave didn't die, but transformed. The extreme manifestations of corruption bleeding away to leave them altered but viable, often bearing distinctive markings that would serve as reminders of their experience. When the wave of restoration finally subsided, Kalen found himself kneeling on the grotto floor, utterly exhausted but filled with profound understanding. Beside him, Lyra had collapsed into a sitting position, her eyes wide with wonder as she processed the experience. Nyx, transformed by its integration of the anti-shadow, moved between them, offering physical support with gentle nudges of its massive head. "You did it," Theron said from the grotto entrance, his voice carrying unexpected respect. "The forest lives." "We all did," Lyra corrected, accepting his help to stand. "Including you and your warriors. Without your protection, we would never have reached the grotto." The return to the Xylos village became a procession of triumph, with scouts reporting the forest's rapid recovery along the entire path. News spread quickly through tribal networks, and by the time they reached the village, representatives from neighboring settlements had already arrived to witness the miracle and pay respects to the Trinity that had restored balance. Elder Serona welcomed them in the central gathering space, where the entire tribe had assembled. "The great testing has ended," she announced formally. "The forest shadow has fulfilled its purpose, not through destruction, but through transformation, a new path not recorded in our most ancient texts." The celebration lasted 3 days, with ceremonies honoring the fallen warriors and giving thanks for the forest's renewal. Throughout the festivities, Kalen observed the Xylos people's changing attitude toward both himself and Nyx, from fear and suspicion to cautious acceptance and eventually to genuine respect. On the 4th morning, Kalen found Lyra at the village's edge, gazing toward the distant mountains that marked the boundary of Xylos territory. "What happens now?" he asked, giving voice to the question that had occupied his thoughts since the battle's end. "Nyx has fulfilled its purpose. I've learned more than I could have imagined about this ecosystem. Theoretically, we're both free to go our separate ways." Lyra's smile held both wisdom and affection. "Are we?" "The Trinity bond remains active, though transformed like Nyx itself. We three are connected in ways that transcend simple purpose or obligation." Through their bond, Kalen felt the truth of her words. The connection had evolved from a tactical necessity to something deeper, a sharing of perspective and purpose that enriched all 3 participants. Nyx, approaching silently on its newly refined limbs, completed their circle with a soft shrill of agreement. "The forest will need ongoing protection," Lyra continued. "The balance we restored is stronger, but not permanent. The devouring was temporarily defeated, not eliminated from possibility." "You're asking me to stay," Kalen realized, surprised by how appealing the prospect had become. His years of isolation before finding Nyx had left him hungry for meaningful connection, and the bond with Lyra and Nyx offered understanding beyond anything he had experienced. "I'm suggesting we continue what we've started," she clarified. "The outsider perspective you bring has value beyond this crisis. Your scientific knowledge complements our traditional wisdom. Together, we can develop new approaches to maintaining balance." Kalen gazed at the forest stretching before them. Vivid green canopy, now punctuated with patches of the distinctive silver-blue foliage that marked areas touched by the restoration wave. The scientist in him saw years of fascinating research. The man saw a place where he had found purpose and connection. "What about your responsibilities as princess? Would your people accept an outsider in such a role?" "They have already accepted the Trinity," Lyra pointed out. "After witnessing what we accomplished together, even Theron acknowledges the value of your presence." She touched the crystal pendant at her throat, which now contained small, integrated shadows that matched Nyx's transformed patterns. "Besides, leadership among the Xylos has always been about harmony with the forest. What better demonstration than our bond?" Nyx nudged Kalen gently, sharing wordless images through their connection. Future possibilities of exploration, discovery, and protection undertaken together. The creature had found its purpose and had no desire to abandon the connection that had helped fulfill it. "I'll stay," Kalen decided, feeling the rightness of the choice settle into his bones. "Not forever. Perhaps, someday, I might want to share what I've learned with the outside world. But for now, this is where I belong." The forest seemed to sigh around them, a gentle rustling of leaves. That carried approval. Through their Trinity bond, All three felt the acknowledgement of their decision by the greater consciousness they now recognized as the forest itself. Not a deity, but a vast, interconnected system with its own form of awareness. In the days that followed, Kalen established a new dwelling that combined his scientific equipment with Xylo's architectural principles, creating a space where research and traditional knowledge could intermingle freely. Lyra divided her time between tribal leadership duties and collaborative exploration with Kalen, their growing personal bond complementing their metaphysical connection. Nyx, no longer simply a predator or protector, but a true guardian of balance, established a territory encompassing the most sensitive energy nexuses of the forest. The creature's transformed nature allowed it to monitor and maintain equilibrium with unprecedented precision, intervening only when necessary and always with measured response rather than overwhelming force. The Xylos people gradually incorporated Kalen into their community, his status as part of the Trinity overcoming cultural barriers. Children particularly sought him out, fascinated by his stories of the world beyond the forest and eager to learn the scientific principles behind phenomena they had previously understood only through tradition. One evening, as they stood together watching Nyx soar through the twilight sky on an aerial patrol, Lyra entwined her fingers with Kalen's. "The Keeper of Tales has begun recording our story," she told him. "Future generations will learn of the outsider who raised the forest shadow and the princess who had no choice but to form a trinity that saved them all." Kalen smiled at the formal phrasing. "Is that how they'll tell it? That you had no choice?" "Perhaps not entirely accurate," she admitted, returning his smile. "But then the best stories never are. They contain truth deeper than mere facts." Above them, Nyx performed an elaborate aerial maneuver that sent bioluminescent particles cascading through the evening air, a display of joy and belonging that required no translation through their bond. Together, the three of them had transformed not just the forest but themselves, creating a new balance that honored both ancient wisdom and new possibilities. As night fell fully, they made their way back to the village, where council fires burned and the Xylos gathered to discuss the future. A future that now included unexpected elements brought by an outsider, a transformed predator, and a princess who had chosen to embrace both. The forest washed over them all, its balance restored but forever changed, much like the trinity that had saved it.